Welcome to UnModeled Behavior, the podcast that helps you to slow down, tune into your inner world, and become the artist of your life. My name is Elise. I am the host of this podcast, and I am going to be sharing spiritual knowledge, archetypal wisdom, personal experience, and tools for lasting transformation. And each week, I will be sharing how to break free from social conditioning, embrace your feminine essence, and create the life of your desires. It's time to unlearn what's been modeled for you and step into your power. Throughout this season of UnModeled Behavior, we are going to go on a journey through the divine feminine archetypes. We're going to cover the 4 major archetypes, which are the maiden, the mother, the wild woman, and the crone, or the wise woman. And then we are going to break these down to even smaller bits and stories of Greek goddesses or women in Celtic folklore, and tune into the further archetypes that it can be broken down to. For example, in this first episode, we're going to talk about the sacred rebel. And the sacred rebel that we're going to be talking about today, or the wild woman that we're going to be talking about today, is Brigid from Celtic mythology. And she is actually a bridge, no pun intended from her name, between the mother and the wild woman. We're going to be talking about this archetypal knowledge in order for you to balance the light and shadow sides of whatever dominant archetype is being expressed for you in your life. This is a podcast for transformation because we're going to be tuning into our own inner world through these stories that I share and through my own vulnerable shares of my personal experiences along the way. And at the end of every podcast, there is going to be a journal prompt or an activity to really anchor in the knowledge and reflect on what we've learned. So, if you are listening to this on YouTube or Spotify, or if you're just watching a clip on Instagram, please be sure to subscribe so that you can be notified every other Sunday on Self Love Sunday when I launch the podcast. And if you're on Instagram, make sure to hit the bell for notifications so that every Monday when the mindful art activity comes out, which is either going to be an expression, the journal prompt that helps you to anchor in the knowledge, and just helps you to dive deeper into the reflections from the archetype and the stories that I've shared here on the podcast to help you on your journey of becoming the creatrix. All of these archetypes are the creatrix. And that is the archetype that I really resonate with the most. The creatrix, a really good example of this is Gaia. That's Mother Earth. Gaia is a creatrix. This is the all-consuming kind of energy that comes from the divine feminine. And so we're going to be journeying through this unmodeled path to really embody that energy along the way. Our first episode today is talking about the sacred rebel. The sacred rebel is one of my favorites, and it's probably one that has expressed itself in a light and shadow side in my life throughout time. I can specifically see, oh yeah, that was just because I didn't want to follow the rules. That's the shadow side of the sacred rebel. So the light side of the sacred rebel, or the wild woman, which that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to use both interchangeably. The wild woman is the artist. The wild woman is fierce and bold. The rebel, the warrior, the wild woman, we can lump some of these together. It depends on the story. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about the wild woman meets the mother archetype. And throughout the season of the podcast, we're going to be going through 12 episodes. Each episode is a smaller archetype of one of the larger 4. And you can also find out which of the larger 4 is the most dominant in your life by taking the quiz that you can find in the show notes or on Instagram in my profile. It's a really fun quiz. It allows you to just get to know yourself, see what archetype is present, and learn more about the light and shadow side. The light side of the sacred rebel is that she's free-spirited, very courageous, authentic, and passionate. that definitely explains me in many ways for probably about the past year. And the shadow side is that she can be reckless, chaotic, rebellious without purpose, and destructive. I like to bring in a visual element to what I'm doing because I'm a seer and I see things in my dreams and through symbols. And when people are talking, I like to imagine what they're talking about. And so I want to give you a visual for the sacred rebel because we are all about breaking chains. We're breaking down the societal conditioning of what's been modeled for you. And I'm going to talk about that after I share the story of Brigid. But in order to carve a new path, you cannot be held down anymore by the path that you have went down. And so the visual for the sacred rebel is just really someone who is breaking free of those chains. And I'm going to invite you to break free of the chains in your life throughout this whole season of the podcast and definitely throughout the next few weeks while we focus on the sacred rebel. So let's talk about the story of Brigid. And I hope I'm saying her name right because I'm not really sure. I just learned about her, but I'm just diving into the information that is being provided today, really sitting with it and tuning into what her energy feels like and looks like. She is the goddess of poetry, healing, and blacksmith. And she's a really powerful symbol for the sacred rebel because there's a lot of duality throughout her story and what she represents. And the one that's noted the most is that she's linked to fire and she forges new paths, ideas, tools, and embodying the spirit of creation. But at the same time, she's associated with water, which symbolizes her healing and nurturing energy. And can you start to see already that even in just those elements alone, fire and water, that one of them very nurturing, very kind. Water, it will drip on a rock until it makes its way through. Whereas fire, it can just take out everything. If we were talking about the archetypes from nature elements, then fire and water put together, that's the wild woman and the mother archetype. This duality shows us how we can have this existing within our own transformation, this fire that creates this alchemy, that creates this transformation, that forges the new path, and then that healing energy that comes in. This is how we find harmony with the sacred rebel. We need to be able to not be so far in the sacred rebel that she's just, going in and lighting everything afire and it's all fierceness. There is a nurturing energy that is very beautiful throughout her story. And her life reflects a deep connection to transformation and rebellion because she balances these contradictory forces. One of them is creation, and one of them is destruction. And that is the beautiful thing about the Sacred Rebel and why I love it so much and why it's one of my favorite tarot decks, because the Sacred Rebel represents being the artist, forging that new path. You have to be able to forge the new path. And I love her story so much because she's a blacksmith. And when you think about the immense amount of heat that it takes to create something, that is so much heat. But it can shift metals. And ultimately, that is such a beautiful power. That's what the alchemist does. That's what the artist alchemist does. That's something that I deeply relate to. I know if you're listening to this, you as well. Being an alchemist means shifting and transmuting something into something else. So maybe you were given this destruction, or maybe you came into this destruction. Maybe it's something you can't control. It wasn't the kind of fiery, burning passion that forges the new path, but maybe it was the shadow side of the destruction, right? But the power of alchemy is that this part of the pain that can come from the destructive path, once that clears, then you step into that water, that nurturing, that flow again, that feminine flow. How to be in the flow by focusing on how we feel. That's the feminine energy. That's the feminine expression. That's the creativity, the being in tune with your feelings, the nurturer side. So one of Brigid's most famous myths tells of her birth And it tells us she was born at sunrise with a flame of fire upon her forehead, which was a divine sign of her destined greatness. And she grew up to become a fierce protector of women and children, a champion of the oppressed, and a goddess of justice. So, in her role as a sacred rebel, she really challenged the expectations of society, defying the limits placed on women and on her as a goddess. And so she was the patroness of midwives and poets, and she nurtured those who cared to create and birth something new into the world. This is calling your sacred rebel in. Do you feel it? Creating something new, protecting that. And whether that's life, art, or revolutionary ideas, inspiration, innovation, if you're a purpose-led business owner, that's like the heart of my business. So her rebellious spirit led her to stand at the threshold between two worlds. One was paganism and another is Christianity. And this is why I love her story so much, because as Christianity spread through Ireland, Brigid was so beloved that she transformed into Saint Brigid, an embodiment of both goddess and saint, forever straddling the line between two opposing belief systems. And I see this happening right now with modern Christianity that sees the aspect of archetypal stories and mystical language that we use to communicate symbols to one another. That's why these archetypes are also so important, because they allow us to understand knowledge. This is what humans have been doing since the beginning of time. As soon as we can tell a story, before we had books, we passed on our knowledge through our ancestry, through stories that were universal that we could relate to. And the thing that I see in Christianity that would be opposing, but is not, let's talk about witchcraft, right? Esoteric knowledge. I see people who are very Christian, go to church, love the teachings of Jesus Christ, and also read tarot cards. Before that, people who were not bridging these two worlds between witchcraft being just your intentions filled out to the world and then your belief in yourself in order to really create that. Also bridging the spiritual side. And it's so beautiful to me because I see this bridge happening right now. I see actually many bridges happening right now. The marriage of science and spirituality, which is very exciting, and I'm going to be talking a lot about on this podcast. And also between the masculine and the feminine. So, in order to understand ourselves, we're understanding what our unique energy is being expressed as. And that's where our divinity, that's where the divine feminine comes from. In order to understand myself, really focusing on, okay, how can I look at these archetypes in my life, how they're being expressed, and really focus on my feminine energy. And these stories are a bridge for that. They allow me to connect through language to you to share this archetypal knowledge. Let's think about how we can look at her story in our own personal lives. So we all face moments where we have to rebel against the limitations that are placed on us within society. We do not live in a healthy society. We live in a sick world. And you have to be able to break free of the conditioning, or what's the modeled behavior, which I'm going to talk about very frequently. And I'm going to say modeled and also familiar, and also I'm just going to use those two for now. So the familiar, what society has shown you, and where you know that it's possible for you to go. She teaches us that rebellion isn't about chaos, but about reshaping old systems and forging new paths that'll allow us to express our full, authentic selves. So I'd like to offer another brief reflection around Brigid and her energy and how to balance this archetype of the sacred rebel. We all face moments in life where we must rebel against the limitations that society places upon us. And she teaches us that true rebellion isn't chaos, but about reshaping old systems, forging new paths that allow us to express our full, authentic selves. Just as Brigid forces the fire and water, we too can find the balance between the different sides of ourselves. If you find yourself confined by societal expectations or personal doubts, ask yourself, what part of me needs to rebel in order to grow? And how can I harness both my creative and destructive powers to reshape my life? Let's talk about how to recognize the shadow side of the rebel archetype, because it's important to recognize when the shadow of the rebel is playing out in our lives, so that way we can balance this energy. So if you notice that your rebel is purposeless, chaotic, and maybe even a little bit self-destructive, it might be a sign that your sacred rebel needs some balancing. So this is a really good journal prompt or a great reflection question to think about. Are you rebelling for the sake of freedom, or are you reacting from a place of fear, anger, or past wounds? And that brings me to the modeled behavior, because this is something that I needed to break free of in my life in order to create this podcast, in order to step forward into this version of myself. I needed to look at what needed to be broken down in order for me to step forward into the most empowered version of myself. This comes down to rebelling for the sake of freedom. When you rebel for the sake of freedom, you free yourself from the limiting beliefs and expectations that society has placed on you. Now let's get to unmodeled behavior and why I named this podcast that. I grew up in pageants and then became a model as an adult. And I was internalizing ideas about what it means to be a woman this entire time. Even as a small child, it wasn't just subconscious, it was very conscious. There were women in my life that were teaching me pageantry. For example, I was in beauty pageants from 3 until 13, so 10 very transformative and formative years of my life. And during that time, I always wanted to have the biggest trophy, and the biggest trophy was like Miss Congeniality, but you had to vote for it. And so, what I was learning and what I learned in order to get that trophy was to have everybody like me, to be the people pleaser, to shift and shape myself to the person standing in front of me to make sure that I was well liked. This is also a shadow side of the maiden archetype, somebody who is kind of filled with self-doubt, questioning their worth. And I was seeking a lot of validation from what I looked like and only my external. And then in return from society and from everybody else as a mirror, what I was getting back was that all that mattered was what I looked like. And at the end of the day, I know that I'm very beautiful, but I know my soul is 10 times more beautiful. So recently I went back to modeling, and the week that I went back to modeling, I wanted to rebel so bad just against the ideas that that industry had given to me as a woman, what I was supposed to look like, how I was supposed to dress, how I was supposed to act in the world, what my masculine energy maybe looked like. Because I also grew up with 3 brothers and I was in the military, right? I had all of this kind of hyper masculine dominant energy, and it even came out competitively, like I said, in unhealthy ways, like wanting to win everyone in the room and wanting to just be that person that could make everyone like them. And the sacred rebel doesn't care about that and can't care about that, because ultimately there's so much freedom found in us embracing our true authentic selves. My biggest fear was that people would not accept me for who I truly am in my authentic, raw, vulnerable expression of myself. And I had a hard time with that over the past year. My last business, even at the end, I really was looking at, okay, how am I not showing up as my most authentic version of myself? So when I met the sacred rebel in my life, which, like I said, has been very consistent, I've always been somebody who asked why and wanted to break the rules and didn't understand why rules were there in the first place. And so I've had this very rebellious nature that is required of the artist and of the creator of their life, which I talk about a lot, because when we are the creator of our life, we change the trajectory of our growth. We create healing. This is where epigenetics comes from. This is the idea that, and not the idea, but there's scientific evidence that we express the genetic behavior that has been passed down to us, and then we continue to bring out that behavior by our own actions. And so the way that we can create healing and then pass down healing instead of trauma is to choose a different path, to surround yourself by people who are doing something that's unmodeled, people who are doing something different, people who are being themselves, people who aren't, bowing to society and doing what it right now, the masculine hyper dominant energy. And the reason that it's unmodeled is because you have to carve a new path. And that's where your unique voice and your purpose comes in, because the only way to find that unique voice and that purpose and to be authentically expressed as yourself is to really embrace the chaotic and sometimes messy, but also beautiful side of the sacred rebel. Because the sacred rebel doesn't want to do what they have been told. They want to do something different. And you don't know what that looks like. And so the subconscious mind is there to protect us. And so when these behaviors come up and the subconscious mind is saying, oh no, I'm not safe, I don't know what this looks like. That's essentially what it's saying, is I don't know what this looks like because we've never been here before. And good, because the unknown is where you're going to find your expansion in all of the pain and the suffering and the things that you've been through. That is what creates this version of you that you can step into authentically, without having to people please, without changing yourself, without shifting your frame or your identity around who you're around. And so I also want to talk about being trapped in a modeled reality, striving for perfection within that reality. It's something that I've struggled with a lot throughout my path, was being perfect. And what does that really mean? We're the ones who define what perfect is. There is no perfect. You're always trying to be better. And so instead of looking at perfect, I started looking at it as like, what is the box that I'm trying to fit into? Because if there's a mold, then that's how I can create myself around the mold. That's that perfect mentality. And that's also what I learned in modeling about my external looks, is if I just looked perfect. I struggled with depression and an eating disorder for many, many years and had low self-image. And one of the biggest reasons why is because I always had this idea around what I was supposed to look like, and that would validate me and give me worth. And then that never happened, because we have to inherently trust that this process is really, in this journey, is really about having self-love that comes from within and out. I even recently changed my name to Elise at Peace on Instagram, ELISEATPEACE. And if you don't follow my personal account, that is the personal account outside of UnModeled Behavior. And the reason that I identified that was that peace to me used to be this Zen Buddha that like sits in meditation and is by the tree. And what I realized was like, we didn't all come to be that person. Like, how boring would it be? The Buddha is the Buddha for a reason. That expression needed to come into the world, just like your expression needs to come into the world. And the only way that I could truly be at peace was to allow love in the places that I had denied myself before, that I had said, oh no, you need to keep changing this part of yourself in order to be accepted. Real true peace came from accepting who I truly am, because all we really have is the present moment. And in the present moment, we are perfect. I love the field of self-development and spiritualism. And one thing that got me really excited in the beginning of the path was like, oh, I can just be this, like, it's like my perfectionistic attitude and competitive attitude went all in on being the best that I could be at being spiritual. And really, the base word of spiritual, spirit, means to breathe. So it just means about being in the present moment. And for me, one of the highest vibrations is love. And the reason why is, our highest vibrational reality is actually what we are expressing authentically in the moment. That is the highest vibration, because it's the highest vibration you can accept and know truly. You're not denying yourself of anything. And then beyond that, love and unconditional love is true acceptance of each and every moment, and this bliss state of peace that comes when you're there. And there's a energy vibrational scale that I look at sometimes, and at the very, very bottom is like suffering and guilt, pain, shame. And really what those things are doing is showing us where we can provide more love. They are a pathway. Our emotions are a pathway. These all show us the way. And instead of saying, oh no, I'm not I'm not that, I'm not feeling that. I'm just going to surround myself with these ideas of how to be better, but deny myself of this reality, which I did for a very long time. And my body ended up shutting down because of it, because I wanted to manifest so bad. I wanted to be this other version of myself, but I didn't actually express and emote or move the emotion energy in motion through my body, so that way I actually was grounded in my own frame, or in who I really am, in my self-concept, and have a positive self-concept and identity in which I truly, truly love. And in truly loving honor, in truly loving myself, I honor all of my emotions, because that is the juice of life. They provide you kind of a compass of where you are going. So in this archetype, I felt that it freed me of this perfectionism and allowed me to come back to my creativity and my voice. This time coming back to modeling, because there's been a few times in my life where I said, okay, I'm not going to do modeling anymore. And one of the reasons why was that I didn't want to be told what to do or how to be. And in reality, that was a limiting belief that I had taken on from the world after I got into the modeling industry. In fact, when I got into the modeling industry, it was really a divine alignment of exactly who I was in the moment. I was guided to go to a Harley Davidson dealership to get my motorcycle license. And I had just moved to Florida, just gotten a divorce, and I didn't really have anything to honor my dad. My dad passed away on a motorcycle. So I was like, I'm going to do this thing to really connect to his spirit. And I asked the guy, hey, I would like to get my license this weekend. He's like, oh, it's only for employees. And I said, okay, I'm just one person. It really means a lot to me. So he said, okay. And he let me in. And I looked around and I saw all these other women that were my age, that were so beautiful. And they kept saying, Harley girl, Harley girl. And I was like, I'm a Harley girl. My first tattoo is Harley Davidson Screaming Eagle Wings, Harley ride or die my whole life. I've been on motorcycles since I could walk, and dirt bikes and four-wheelers. I'm like, I'm a Harley girl. So I keep saying, Harley girl, Harley girl. The final day comes around and they're like, hey, be ready for the photo shoot. And I'm like, wait, what photo shoot? And they're like, for the Harley girls. And I'm like, wait, what's a Harley girl? And then they told me it was a model for Harley Davidson. And I was like, that's a job? And they're like, you don't have that job? You just like genuinely like motorcycles? I'm like, yes. Like, all right, well, you're hired. And so me having any idea after being in modeling after that for a few years, because after that I worked for some very aligned brands. Progressive Bike Insurance was one of my favorite ones. I called myself Motorcycle Flow. Um, that brand was so aligned with me. I didn't have to change myself. I didn't have to cover my tattoos. The moment that I thought that I needed to make money in the modeling industry, and I started doing jobs that were not who I truly was, that's when I started internalizing ideas around, okay, I have to change myself. And that's really like what I've broken down recently going into the modeling industry, is that no one was telling me what to do. I'm going to attract whatever I'm aligned with. And when I'm aligned with myself and fully empowered, then I'm going to attract what's the most empowered thing for me. And I'm really good at promotional modeling. I'm really good at event modeling. And I actually really love it. I love being able to travel, getting paid to travel. I love representing brands that are aligned. It fuels me. It makes me feel great. And I've been doing it my whole life. And so this allowed me to have a different perspective on, oh, I had this limiting mindset around what made me worthy, even within this one concept of being a model. I didn't want to be a model anymore. Why? Because I wanted to rebel against it. But I never really had to have that mindset to begin with, because me being authentically me and vulnerably expressed allowed that space for me to attract that into my life. And this is how our relationships work. This is why knowing what our divine archetype that is the most expressed, that's why it's so important, because I could look at that and go, oh, I was shackling myself down. I really wanted to just rebel for no reason. There was this chaotic energy that I didn't really know what to do with. And it allows us to see maybe where our blind spots are. That's why archetypes are so helpful. The same with the zodiac, and the same with the cycles of nature. And that's why I share full moon practices and things like that, to get in tune with the rituals of the planet, the cycles of the nature, and to really guide our own awareness. These questions that I'm asking you, when have you felt trapped? by the structures from societal conditioning, and when are you being called and how are you being called to be that sacred rebel. That allows you the space to look at the symbolism within the sacred rebel and say, oh, the fire and the water, how do I balance the water part? Maybe I'm too much fire right now. And then you can look at the archetype and say, oh, that's very helpful. It allowed me to step maybe more into a grounded rebellion that allows me to create a life that I want rather than a life that has been given to me. And that's the one that's based in fear. That's the one that's based on your subconscious only knowing one path, because that's the path that your DNA, markers have given you, and the society has given you, in which you're in. But when you look around and you see all these people with a different experience, you start to realize, oh, this is just a perspective, and I can shift my perspective. Even just by asking these reflection questions throughout the podcast, you are shifting your perspective right now. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, because it allows us to say, oh, I can make change each and every moment of each and every day. And all I need to know is my own inner world, my own inner knowing. I want to go really a little bit deeper into a journal activity. And if you are watching this on YouTube, maybe pause the video and come back when you have a journal. If you're listening in your car or something like that, this is still very helpful to just reflect on throughout your day and kind of keep coming back to. And we're going to be talking about this archetype for the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to be offering some more activities. And so this really allows you to anchor in the knowledge. So maybe this is the first time you're going to hear it, and then on Mindful Monday, you're going to see the prompt, and you're going to go, oh, okay, let me dive a little bit deeper. But I want to go into this journal activity. Let's talk about embracing your wildness. Let's talk about that wild, raw, authentic, vulnerable version of you that is so worthy of love and does not need to be controlled and held back. The first prompt that I have for you is, where in my life have I tamed my wildness? Where in my life have I tamed my wildness? What beliefs have held me back from stepping into my true self? Your most authentic version of you requires that rebellion. It requires you to do things that are different. That's how we change and grow. And then finally, where do I feel called to rebel against expectations? What makes you uncomfortable? What are the expectations that you're like, I don't like that standard. I want to live a different life. I don't like the way that this has made me feel. This is how you step into your purpose-led work, because your purpose-led work is all about your unique journey. And your expectations and what has been placed on you by society is going to be different than mine. I'm very connected to being the unmodeled behavior, because I have a past of being a model. But you can still understand that the unmodeled behavior is that path unknown. And the only way to get there is to do something different, have that pattern interrupt. Those pattern interrupts, they happen through creativity. They happen through expression. They happen by slowing down and being in our body and listening to what's present. They can't happen while we're out in society doing what we were told to do. That's a performative society. That's the masculine dominant, do, produce, produce, produce. And you're just going to keep cycling this energy that's not really serving you. So I want to finish off by talking about the Divine Feminine Archetypes Quiz, because if you love this content, then you're really going to love the Divine Archetypes Quiz, because it's just some really fun questions that allow you to dive into the 4 major archetypes, which we talked about at the beginning, and we're going to continue to talk about, which are the maiden, the mother, the wild woman, and the wise woman, or the crone, the mystic. These help us to understand our life. Brigid was literally the bridge between the wild woman and the mother archetype. She connects both of those. So she's a sub archetype. We understand her symbols. It's not just fire like the wild woman. There's some water from the mother archetype. And we can see how to invite that energy into our lives. And even beyond that, I talked about at the beginning being very in tune with these visuals that I like to visualize. And if you're picturing the sacred revel breaking those chains, what is the fire that is going to light? What are you passionate about? What do you love to do? What just lights your soul up? That is your fire. And that will turn into the water. That will turn into the flow. That will bring you into this feeling of surrender in the universe where you feel like you're held and things can be slow. And you can be patient and you can be like the water that's dripping the way through the rock and not just destructing everything in its path like the fire. So you can find this Divine Feminine Archetypes quiz in the show notes, or if you're following me on Instagram at the UnModeled Behavior, you can also find it in my links in bio. So just go to the link and it'll say Divine Archetype Quiz, and then you'll get the results and you'll be able to understand throughout this journey, this unmodeled journey, going down this new path, being that sacred rebel, so that you can understand when I'm talking about a different archetype and sharing stories. Oh, I see that archetype more so in my life right now. I'm starting to understand this archetype a little bit more. I want to balance this part of it so that I can feel fueled and come into my divine feminine essence. Be in tune with my body, be in tune with nature, be in tune with my creative side. That's what this is really about. Is how to be that creatrix of your life, how to be the artist of your reality, how to understand yourself, which nobody can do but you. And further, if this is something that sounds really exciting to you, you're like, I want to go down the unmodeled path. I want to forge my own road. I want to work in my purpose work. I'm ready to step even further into, the journal prompts are great. The podcast is great. I'm loving the information, but I want to go deeper. Then book a call with me because I would love to talk to you about where you're at and where we can go on this path together. I'm going to be having live workshops once a month on the first Saturday of every month. And every divine feminine archetype that we talk about on this podcast. So for example, today is the sacred rebel. That divine archetype doesn't just have a prompt and this knowledge that I'm sharing, but it also has a grounding technique, a meditation, and then an intuitive art exercise, which I have been sharing with people for a long time. It allows our expression of our emotions to be the doorway, the pathway to how we're truly showing up in our lives. And then for 2 weeks, you're going to integrate that knowledge. So you can be around a bunch of other women who are doing this work of like, okay, I'm supposed to go do this because that's what, society told me my whole life. I prepared for this whole career. Now I'm in this career. And then you're like, why am I so sad? There's a way to get into your deeper knowing, your heart-led work, your mission, your purpose on this planet. And I want to help you get there. I want to take the unmuddled path with you. That's what this is all about for me. It's about going down the journey into the unknown, surrendering to that, trusting that my subconscious is doing its job. It's like, hey, I don't know this here, but then I'm stepping in with the tools, the actionable tools every day to make choices that take me down the path that I want to go and not just a familiar hill. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can also book a discovery call with me to see if you're a good fit for this journey together. We're going to go down this path. And I would love to support you along the way. And also to celebrate my birthday, I am turning 33 tomorrow at the time of this podcast. I am 32, going on 33 tomorrow. I am offering an extra session, a one-on-one, and a custom intuitive art exercise to help you break the limiting beliefs and behaviors that are holding you back from your most expansive, empowered self. So if you join us and you're like, I want to come to these workshops, I have a workshop tomorrow on my actual birthday, September 14th. It's at 11 a.m. This one is going to be all about how to step into that goddess through our body movement, through nature, through empowering one another and doing the things that call us because they're fun and they're exciting. And that's what lights us up. And the more that we follow what lights us up, like for me, dancing and costumes are something that my entire life I've loved. And I can't wait to share that. I'm going to share my tool with the rest of everybody else because that tool alone, us being in our body, I hated my body. I was so against my body for such a long time and I didn't listen to it. Because I didn't listen to it, I dealt with chronic illness and disease, which I'm going to talk about in later episodes. But I know how to heal it. We all have these gifts. We all have the ability to be that creator, to be that creative, expressive artist of our reality. We've just forgotten. This isn't about learning, it's about unlearning what has been modeled for you, so that you can step into who you came here to be. So again, in the show notes will be the Divine Feminine Archetype Quiz, and this will help you to really understand which of the archetypes is the most present for you in your life right now. And if you're just like, I'm so in, I want to go down this unmodeled path, I am fully ready, I have been waiting for this, then join me. I have also made these custom headpieces because costume is like a huge part of my journey. And this is about igniting our crown chakra and the divinity, igniting that within. And so I've been making these headpieces for a while now. They're called my Divine Line. This is my Virgo goddess headpiece. I love it so much. I just started adding these detachable chains because I used to wear a goddess chain and then this like big headpiece. So if you are listening to me on Spotify and not on YouTube, I'm wearing a big like gold crown that has some elements of the earth because I'm an earth goddess Virgo, and it helps me to ground my energy. And then across my forehead is a gold chain that dangles down with a big moon that is right on top of my third eye. And if you join the unmodeled path, I am going to custom make your archetype and you one of these amazing headpieces. I'm also going to be giving one away tomorrow during the goddess dance birthday life celebration, because what I want more than anything is to connect with people from all over and celebrate life, celebrate what I truly love, and to ignite that in other people. So thank you for joining me today on the first episode of UnModeled Behavior. This has been quite the journey. I had to stop many times and then even contact customer support on my Mac. So this has been a definite challenge to be able to show up today. I've been wanting to do this for a really long time. I've recorded other podcasts and never moved forward with them. And that's really divine alignment, right? Divine timing. When we're ready, the universe is like, okay, this is a full send. I can sit here, this is my empowered voice. This isn't my stressed voice. This is this is knowledge that I know. And I'm so excited for you to join me on this journey. Please subscribe. It really helps my podcast. And also send this to any of your goddesses in your life. And you're like, oh my gosh, let's get in touch with the Sacred Rebel and take this quiz. Which archetype are you? And then tag me on social media. So tag me at UnModeled Behavior. And I just want to say, remember that the life you want isn't something that you chase, it's something that you create. And to do that, it requires slowing down, getting in tune with our inner world, and becoming the true artists of our life. Thank you for joining me. And I will see you on the next episode, Self Love Sunday, in 2 weeks on the UnModeled Behavior podcast.